Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Govs on the Go Alumni Edition, a podcast featuring alumni from the College of Arts and Letters here at Austin Peay State University. My name is Dr. Buzz Hoon. I'm the Dean of the College. I'm also the host of the podcast. And today I'm talking with a very special guest, a good friend of mine, Kyle Christmas, who graduated with multiple degrees from Austin Peay, the first one coming in 2011. And then also getting degrees in 2013, 2018, and soon we'll have another degree. Kyle, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Buzz. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, and we were just talking before we started recording. One more degree for you. Can you just give a little bit of a preview of what that is?
Sure. I am finishing up the EDD program in higher education administration here at Austin Peay State University, and I'll defend my dissertation later this month.
That's great. I'm so happy for you, so proud of your achievements, and I'm sure many people are as well.
Thanks, Buzz.
Let's give everybody a life update. Tell us where you are in case somebody doesn't know where Kyle Christmas has been.
Sure. I work here at Austin Peay State University. I'm the executive director for Accreditation and External Compliance. I came to Clarksville a long time ago, which we'll talk about, and I haven't left. I've built my family here, built my career here, and Austin Peay has proven to be an integral part of every step of that. College of Arts and Letters being the center of my journey. My wife is born and raised here in Clarksville. She works here in the school system, and my 12-year-old daughter is in the schools here at CMCSS as well. So we're trucking along.
Yeah, that's great. We'll talk all about you, not only your career, but things that you do in your off time in just a bit. Let's begin at the beginning. And you were from just down the road, over a county, Ashland City. You grew up. What kind of things did you like to do as a young person growing up?
Oh, Buzz, I spent most of my time on my bicycle outside. So
Yes.
I lived in a very rural part of Cheatham County, sort of across the river from Ashland City. Um, not a whole lot else going on. So there was a whole lot of riding the bike and climbing the hill, and a lot of time spent outside and playing sports. And that was formative for me. Just sort of connecting with nature and with some of my friends and peers on that side of the river growing up. So yeah, it was great. I went to Cheatham County Central High School, which is right there in Ashland City, and I thought that was the size of the world, right? And
Yeah.
those little rural schools, didn't know much else, and so I got to know a lot of great people, and I think growing up in a small town affects a lot of your worldview, especially early on, but also gives you a lot to think about as you get out of that place, which I know we'll talk about a little bit as we go on here.
Yeah. So I'm sure there were some teachers, somebody along the way that helped instill some confidence in you, inspire you. Any teachers you want to point out?
Absolutely, and this is a little bonus call out to College of Arts and Letters. In high school, I had a history teacher, Lieutenant Colonel Jim Lavery. Jim Lavery was the person who kind of made it clear to me that you could be sort of into a lot of the same kinds of things I was, sports and outdoors and hard work, but also be an academic. He was a pure historian, of course a veteran of our United States Army. Jim Lavery was inspired by Dewey Browder, longtime longtime chair of the
Yeah.
Department of History and Philosophy here at Austin P. And so I knew Dewey Browder before I ever knew Dewey Browder because Jim Lavery he would always talk about him and his influence. I got to see Jim probably 8 years after I graduated or so, and told him that I had spent the last few years, I mean, the start of my career as a teacher. And first he apologized, and then he laughed and said he was very happy to hear that, and and he was proud to be a part of that journey for me.
So when did you discover a love of writing, a love of reading? Because at some point in time, as you said, you had all these other talents and interest in things, but at some point you must have discovered that the love of language.
Yeah, I've been a voracious reader since I was very little. My mom likes to tell me that I learned to read from the newspaper. I've always been fascinated by the written word, and through elementary school, I enjoyed writing stories and creating little picture books and things. That was always fun. And then I had some great teachers throughout middle school and high school who kept putting books in our hands, and that's becoming a bit of a lost thing these days in K-12 education. But I can't emphasize enough how important it was to have a copy of The Great Gatsby in my hand walking through my junior English class. You know, I think that was a big piece of it. And then getting to Austin P, I was just surrounded by faculty who have built their careers digging into these great pieces of literature, and that appreciation grew even more.
You also mentioned a little bit about your mom, and how her she was a hard worker, somebody that instilled, I think, the work ethic that you have displayed. Can you talk a little bit about your influence of your mom?
Sure, absolutely. Grew up in a single parent household for the most part, and she worked incredibly hard to make sure that we didn't want for anything. Um, she showed me how to work through a lot of practical firsthand things. You know, when you sort of live in the sticks, you have things you've got to do.
Yeah.
She also inspired me to go out and find other ways to work and grow in my skill set and make a little money as a kid. And so I grew up farming. You know, Ashland City's tobacco country, so a lot of summers spent topping and cutting tobacco. I grew up going with her to work at a stone yard in Bellevue, Tennessee, where she was the bookkeeper for many years. Learned to drive a forklift when I was 11, you know. So it's just that that sort of upbringing changed how I approach pretty much everything in my life. I know that it's going to take grit. It's going to take a little bit of perseverance and gumption to get where you want to go.
So at some point in time in high school, you decided you wanted to go to college. How did that come about, and how did you get to Austin P?
Yeah, so college wasn't really in our day-to-day conversations at home or really even amongst many of my peers. Um, I'm the first person in my immediate family to go to college, and so my mom always encouraged me that if that's what I wanted to do, I should do it. I didn't know what that looked like or how to get there.
Yeah.
Um, I was an athlete in school. I really enjoyed that part of growing up, and I thought maybe that could be an avenue toward a college education. And so I came to Austin P with the intent to play football. That was pretty much the only thing on my mind. I figured out later what degrees were available and what faculty I could connect with.
Yeah.
At that time, that wasn't in the cards. I took a turn toward work and earning money instead. And so um, I think it was fortuitous to have some great coaches and teammates growing up who could pour into me and help me see that as a potential path for myself. I think it actually worked out better for me to then veer from that path when I got here and realize that, you know, this is a much bigger place than just the gridiron.
It's a reoccurring theme to have you enter a door for one reason, and for your life to change in a different direction. We're going to talk about that several times. So I like the idea that you came here with the athletics in mind and how things changed for you. You mentioned um, taking a full-time job. You were working, I believe, at Starbucks.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I I got my first paid official job when I was 15, and so I didn't know what it was like to not have a paycheck when
Yeah.
I got to college, and football players don't earn paychecks, and so that threw me off a little bit. Yeah, so when I broke away from the athletic scene, I started looking and um, walked into the coffee shop down on Madison Street, handed over my resume and asked for an interview. I was behind the counter in a week, and then that turned into 4 years. So that was a great opportunity to have while in school for a lot of reasons. I think the most important is that the coffee shop culture and vibe is even, the big box coffee store like Starbucks. It's a pretty special way to meet people and get to know people. I
Right.
still see people in town, and I can tell you how they like their latte. It's crazy how those things stick, but I think the network that I'm sure I'll talk about a couple more times over the next half hour or so, the network that I've built over the past 15, 20 years started in that coffee shop, which is pretty interesting.
So it must have been challenging to not only work full time, but to try to get your education. What are your early memories? What kind of things do you remember doing early on?
Yes, it was challenging. I remember having peers in classes who were spending a lot more time hanging out on campus than I was, and that had a lot to do with just sort of the division of my waking hours. I would spend my mornings and early afternoons here on campus, and then get in the car and drive down the street and sling coffee till midnight.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty steady rhythm for 4 years. Of course, you get into your upper division courses and you can build your schedule a little bit differently, and that was good. But yeah, it was a balance for sure. And throughout all of that, I never stopped farming in Ashland City either over the summers, and so there's always a little something else on the side. But it was a time of hustle for sure. It was fascinating when I took my first real job, which we'll talk about later. Things actually slowed down. You expected that you'd speed up at that point. But
It's
yeah,
amazing
it
what
was
you can do
about.
when you're young. That's right.
I could not do it now.
Well, you're still working very hard. You're still doing full-time work and getting that degree, which is very admirable. But what class do you remember a teacher, a class in English that you said, okay, now this has got my interest.
Yeah, I mean, the first one was actually an introductory course. I was in an English 1020 class, just gen ed with a bunch of people majoring in a wide number of things. My initial major was actually political science. I didn't know why. Didn't grow up in a political household, but that's where I landed when I first got here. And in that class, my second semester, um, it was Dr. Linda Davis, retired from Austin P. She she comes to me and says, "Hey, your writing level is a little above and beyond some of your peers in this class. You interested in working with some of them as they're through some peer editing and things like that?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." And I found so much joy in that. And
Hmm.
so it was the writing and writing about short stories and poetry and literature in that class that pulled me into the English major, and of course pulled me into the idea that maybe I could teach writing and literature in a grander sense. So it all started there, and then I think you'll hear from a lot of folks who do the English program here at Austin P that there are a couple of professors that are just sort of key cogs in the wheel, and Mickey Wadia was one of those for me in the Shakespeare course. Shakespeare can be daunting to most, even English majors. And so it was fascinating to hear it sort of transformed in that way in that class. And a lot of light bulb moments, a lot of times where you see a bigger picture of humanity through a single author. And so I had a great time in that course as well.
Nice. Outside of all the things so you're working full time, you're going to class. Uh, you also learn how to play the guitar because obviously you don't know what to do with your time. And as you're learning to
Exactly.
play with the guitar, the entry into music opens up another avenue for you, which is
Sure.
this ministry on campus.
Yeah, that's right. Freshman year, I was in my apartment down the street, trying to figure out, it's after work. I don't have football to pour any kind of effort into as a passion, so to speak. And so I picked up a guitar. A couple of guys at Starbucks were players, and I I I remember college was the first time I had access to the internet as well, um, regular access anyway. And so I remember seeing videos online and chord charts and explanations of how to do this thing. And it seemed to me like suddenly the whole world was open. I didn't, I could access something that I couldn't access before. And so I worked really hard at it, and learned a bit. And the more I started playing with other people, the more competitive it became, sort of like the sports background. And when you're throwing a baseball or kicking a soccer ball with somebody, you always want to one up them just a little bit more. And that just became part of that for me too, just trying to get better and better. Eventually, that did become an opportunity to play music with some great friends as part of a college ministry here on campus. We truck in a big box truck to the Clement Auditorium on Wednesday nights, load in too much music gear and play loud for a while and go back home. But that was a really cool part of really the back half of my time in undergrad.
Yeah, that's great that you had you were experiencing all different facets of what it means to be a college student and a full-time worker, which is still amazing to me. But when did you have an idea that you again might be headed towards being a teacher?
Yeah, it did start in that 1020 class. Then there was a stretch where I was in love with the literature and the writing, but the teaching aspect seemed maybe secondary. I didn't know what I would do after undergrad, but uh, I knew that that was always an option. I knew that that's something I could do and would be fulfilled doing. It wasn't until I got in the high school classroom that it really dawned on me that this was education is the place where I'm meant to be. And it was a pretty special transition. I took a different kind of job right out of undergrad. I was working for our county government in the property assessor's office, and it was dry and not fulfilling in the kind of way that that you would expect for yourself if you've had your sights set on something based
Right.
in the humanities and education, this grand idea that you can change the world one student at a time. You're not doing that when you're measuring new homes in subdivisions. Uh, that was a great stage to kind of learn a bit more about our county government. But then I got my first opportunity to teach, and it was the fall after I graduated, and it was uh, unexpected, but a really awesome thing.
And you're thrown into the deep end because
Quite.
now you're teaching high school seniors.
It's true. So there, uh, Clarksville Academy is right across the street from us here. As part of an assignment in an education class, which was my minor for a while, uh, I had to submit resumes to a handful of schools. It was something we all did. I didn't think anything of it. Apparently, they had mine in a filing cabinet somewhere, and they became desperate about 2 days into the school year, as another faculty member had left, and they called me. I came in covered in mud from that job with the property assessor's office. Um, Asked them if I could go home and shower before I met with them. They said, "No, just come on in. We'll be all right." Um, so I did. They hired me. I changed out my work boots for a tie and went in to the classroom. I was teaching. I just picked up that faculty member's load, and so he was teaching honors level juniors and seniors. Um, that sounded great to me. It was an American literature survey and a British literature survey. Uh, the only thing I didn't really uh, feel prepared for was that some of the students in that senior class were just 4 years younger than me. And so it meant figuring out some dynamics pretty quickly uh, in a very real-time capacity.
How did you adapt? Because I remember early on teaching in college, and I felt like there wasn't much of an age gap as well. So I decided I'm going to wear a tie every day, and I'm going to grow some facial hair, and I've kept
Yeah.
that going since then.
I did the tie bit. It was my first time in life wearing a tie. I bought a handful of them. Um, I actually tried to, I guess, I don't know. I stuck to the role. I was an English teacher. The students didn't know much about me in that stretch. I had to do it that way just to make sure that they understood that I was there to do that thing. And it wasn't until about 6 or 8 weeks into the school year that I let my guard down a little bit. I think the first thing that happened, I was walking from the lunchroom back over to my classroom, and the seniors had a free period, and they were on this blacktop area in between some of the buildings playing basketball. And the ball rolls over to me, and instinct kicks in. I pick it up, I shoot, it goes in, and I keep walking. And they're like, "Hold on a second. You've been teaching us meter and poetry. You don't get to just make a basket and the ball." So I think that drilled home, a little bit more of that relationship. But I did have to set that boundary first and make sure that they understood what I was there to do.
That this teacher is also a human being.
It's funny how that works, isn't it? We don't plug into the wall at the end of the day.
Well, I'm sure. How long were you teaching? And let's talk, and we can talk a little bit in a moment here about the opportunity to study abroad and how that impacted.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I did that for 9 years, 8 years at Clarksville Academy. And then my last teaching stop was at Richview Middle School here in town. Toward the end of that school year, I got the opportunity to come on board here at Austin P. But at CA, I taught honors level juniors and seniors all throughout. And then as I progressed there, I also taught AP English Literature and an AP European History course. I wound up minoring in religious studies with some history components at Austin P at the end of my undergrad. And so that was fun. I got to teach some one-off elective courses too. I did a Shakespeare course, called in Mickey Wadia quite a bit for that one, um, and some others. So yeah, did that for a while. It was incredibly fulfilling. I still see students all around town, and there's still a handful of students here on campus who were my last batch coming through Austin P. Um, and I really I relish those opportunities to catch up and to see how things have gone for them. And it's how it is, Buzz, when you've had relationships with students, someone's going to come and tell you how big of an impact that your class had or your relationship had. And there's nothing like that. There's nothing more fulfilling than that after the fact, that you don't get in every kind of career.
That's right. That's the gift of education that we impact lives and help people along the way in many ways that we don't know because we're doing it every day.
Exactly right. You get lost in the weeds a little bit.
Yeah. So one of the things that you mentioned that you had an opportunity to do was to go on a study abroad, which is about not just the student's personal growth, but your own personal growth. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Yeah, it really was. I mentioned I grew up pretty poor in rural Cheatham County. I had only been to maybe 3 states when I came to Austin P. And so my first year teaching, actually, a fellow teacher, another alum of the College of Arts and Letters here at Austin P, um, he was taking students to Germany using a third-party provider who had the whole trip planned. And he had more students sign up than he realized he was going to have. And and he needed another chaperone. He asked me to go. I said, that sounds crazy. I don't speak German. He was a German teacher, an English teacher as well. I have no context here. And he said, it's fine. Everything's planned. I just need you to help me keep these kids out of trouble. I said, I can do that part. And so I did. The spring of my first year teaching, went to Austria, Germany, Switzerland, and Liechtenstein with a group of 20 or so students, and it was incredible for me. And then obviously watching their minds sort of expand in real time as well. And I saw that there was something really special in that. So I knew that I wanted to try to create that similar opportunity for more students. The German trip would continue on with my colleague, but I knew not all of our students were studying German, and some would want some other experiences. So my second year, I had the opportunity to develop a trip to England, home based in London. And I did what I think any smart person would do in that moment. I called Mickey Wadia and said, I'll pay your way. We've got enough students ready to go. I'd love to have an expert guide. Uh, Mickey said, well, yes, of course. I'll have to ask my chair. It was a spring break trip. He called me back 3 minutes later and said he was in. And so I brought Mickey Wadia along on my first leadership trip abroad. I took a big group of students with some of their parents as well. We weren't really doing study abroad so much as a cultural experience. There was no course associated, so anybody could sign up. But it was incredible to watch the world get a little bit bigger, or
Yeah.
maybe a little bit smaller for those students as we did those things. And had the opportunity to do that in Ireland the next year, and another couple of trips to England after that with students. And that was an incredibly fulfilling part of my time at Clarksville Academy and in the classroom.
Well, I'm so glad that you opened the world to so many young lives. That is an experience that they'll remember for the rest of their lives, and how important
Absolutely.
that is to their own personal growth, as you mentioned. But you also said that you spent a summer in Oxford, and that helped you grow in terms of your own approach towards scholarship. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that's right. I had in 2016 I jumped into the MA in English here at Austin P. Um, I thought at that time maybe PhD in English and tenure track route might be something I was interested in pursuing. I knew the MA was the first stop, and so I was studying with some incredible professors, some of whom I work with regularly now in my role. Dan Shea being one of them. I get to Dan, as you know, oversees our study abroad and international exchange operation here at Austin P, and I get to work with him on a very regular basis in that capacity. So that's pretty cool. But in that program, an opportunity arose to do Oxford University does sort of in between terms. They invite scholars or teachers or whomever from around the world to come in and take part in various little short courses. They're not for credit. I didn't earn Oxford credit or anything like that, but you get a certificate at the end. I did a 3.5 week short course with two Oxford Dons looking at Victorian literature and modernist literature. Um, and it completely revolutionized how I thought about writing in that field. I came back from that experience uh, eager to publish. I felt ready to jump into that scholarly world in that kind of way, and I got the opportunity to do that. That opened some doors for me, getting more involved with the Tennessee Philological Association, um, Lovers of Language here in the state, universities all across the state. Was able to publish the first couple times in their journal, and that did it changed how I thought about scholarly work in humanities and beyond, because all of that carries over into my scholarly work now, looking at higher education.
So how did you get to Austin P? Because you mentioned you had this career and teaching kids. I'm sure again it was very rewarding, but how did you get the opportunity to come over and join us?
Sure. That was always a career goal. It's a place that's very near and dear to my heart, of course. So it was actually fall of 2019. I told the head of school at Clarksville Academy that this would be my last year because I'm looking to transition into higher ed. And there were some opportunities I thought might be coming open here that I would pursue. Um, Spring of 2020, I'm wrapping up my final year teaching, and the world shut down, including hiring at Austin Peay State University. And so they had already replaced me at Clarksville Academy, as they should, because I told them in August. And so I spent that summer really in the wind a little bit. Got a call and an opportunity to teach at Richview Middle School that fall, and on into the spring of 2021. And I kept on the lookout for opportunities. One of the things that I did at Clarksville Academy was I helped to lead their SACS accreditation efforts, mostly on the writing component. SACS, of course, also has a K-12 arm. Um, and and so I worked on accreditation there. Saw an opportunity come open here at Austin Peay in the provost's office to contribute to accreditation efforts, um, and I applied. Of course, I was in the middle of the school year, so I let our administrators there know that what I was seeking. They understood completely. And I called Mickey Waddy again. I said, "Do you know this person who's hiring for this job?" And he said, "Of course I do. She was at my house last week." And so he gives her a call. I don't know that she was going to consider my resume, given that I had just been in the classroom for 9 years. But she gave me a chance, brought me in for an interview, and the rest, I guess, is history. I've been here 4 years last weekend, March 1st, 2021.
Wow, and my memories of Austin P begin with you were one of the very first individuals I remember meeting, and how warm and accepting you were to this new person coming into the university. So now I know a little bit of why you were doing that. You're passing along that goodwill. And let's talk a little bit about your job and what are the things that really bring you joy and what do you like to do?
Yeah. So leaving the classroom was hard, and it's still hard now. I have days where I very deeply miss those relationships and the great conversations and debates that you can have in the classroom. I really do miss that. I've had an opportunity to teach a couple of times here on campus through President's Emerging Leaders Program or some other opportunities. But for the most part, it's fully administrative now. My job has evolved a bit over the past few years, but the bulk of what I do is ensure that we remain accredited with the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commission on Colleges, which is our access to federal financial aid and all Title IV funding, which means that's how we operate. We accreditation is of course a stamp of quality. It's also, it's that bridge to the purse strings. And so many of our students rely on that. More than 60% of our students are Pell eligible here at Austin Peay. And so this is a critical function. And I'm honored to be able to leave my office and walk around campus on a day-to-day basis and just know that the work that I'm doing with my colleagues here in the provost's office and across the university, I know that our work is creating a pathway for these students to be here. I didn't know what accreditation was when I came here in 2007, but I walked across campus in the same way these students did, and somebody else was doing that work
That's
to
right.
make sure that I had access, that I could get that federal financial aid to come here and realize my own dream. And so it's incredibly fulfilling to get to do that. And I think the great thing about this role is I get to interact with people all over campus, not just in academic affairs, but all divisions. And so I've built some great relationships with colleagues all over, and everybody understands what we're here to do. I think that's a really special thing about our university is we know who we are. We're leaning into that every day. So I think that's what I like most about this role is, of course, the bigger impact beyond a single classroom of students, I guess, but also building those relationships with colleagues, academic and otherwise, who help make this thing go.
So, and a very important part of what we do here behind the scenes. And not only, I think it should be noted that our recent accreditation went through without any issues. And that is just, I mean, it really was special recognition for your involvement, for other people in the provost office that have worked very hard to make this process go through. It was just, I mean, I've been in higher education over 30 years, and to have this is just unbelievable.
It's a feat. But you also know it wasn't just us in this office. I mean, you and your colleagues in academic administration, and then our faculty and staff
Yeah.
all over the university really made that happen. I was honored to get to shepherd that process, and then at the end to get a very short report that simply said there are no findings or recommendations.
Yeah.
That's the best report.
So you're going to be completing your degree very soon. What are some of the other things that drive you? What do you spend your time doing? I'm sure you've got a 12-year-old, so I'm sure you're running around.
Yeah, that's true. She certainly keeps us on our toes. I started the EDD program in 2022, and so that has been pretty central to my outside of work time for a while. I still play music regularly. That's a big part of who I am in a way that I can detach from some of the hustle and bustle of the day to day. I've been telling folks who ask, "What am I going to do when the dissertation's done?" Uh, I I love to build guitars. I love to work with my hands and craft, and I haven't built one since I started working on my dissertation. And
Okay.
so that'll be the first thing to do. And so I'm eager to get back into some of those hobbies that don't require me to cite a single source.
Yeah, and I'm sure through this whole process, your wife has been. I mean, I think we don't realize sometimes until much later on in life how they're there picking up all the time that you have to devote not only to your job but also to getting that degree done.
Yeah, it's true, and I'm really lucky. She beat me to the doctorate. She did hers a few years ago, and so I was on the other end of that
Mm.
as she was going through her program. And so I've been really blessed to have someone who understands where I am and understands why I need to be locked up in the office for a little while, hammering out the next chapter or what have you.
Could you ever imagine, as a young person growing up and riding a bike and doing the crazy things that you did back in Cheatham County, that you are soon to have a doctorate and have accomplished what you have done?
No, no, I didn't understand what a master's degree was when I was in high school. People talked about doing more college after getting a degree, and I didn't understand what that meant or why anybody would ever do that. And so no, I couldn't have foreseen this, but that's kind of the great thing about a university for people like me, which is a whole lot of folks that we serve here at Austin P and elsewhere. You've served at other public, regional universities. You know what it means for a student to come in and suddenly have a better idea of what's available, what can happen. It takes some courage to make that leap and to go into an environment where you're going to kind of feel out of place sometimes. I sure did. But I knew that I was being exposed to a different future for myself. I just had to make a decision about what I wanted to do and go for it with as much gumption as I had.
That leads us right into our last question, Kyle, which is about recommendations that you have for students. Looking back now, you've got several degrees, and so you've had different times of your life where you've had to push through. But in general, what kind of recommendations do you have?
I think a really pivotal one right now is, you've noticed, I'm sure, over the past decade or so, working with students, our student body's changing, and our faculty and staff are changing. The world is changing, and the way we think, the way we commit our time, our attention span, it's just different. And so I think the most important thing I can emphasize to anybody who's thinking about higher ed, and just having a conversation with a cousin of mine who's thinking about going to Austin P. I said the same thing to her. You've got to be willing to make a longer term commitment than you're used to right now. We're used to watching a 20-second video and getting everything we need.
Right.
You're going to have to read a book. You're going to have to commit to a project. You're going to need to build a long-term 4-year plan, or longer. And I think it's so important to come into an environment like this with that in mind. This is a long game, but it's a worthwhile game. And every second that you're on campus, every year that passes, your relationships flourish, your worldview is developing, your work ethic is developing. And so I think that's probably the first thing that I would emphasize is, there is not a whole lot of instant gratification in anything educational. It takes work, and it takes commitment and time on task. And so I would emphasize that. And then, as we've talked about, I think you've got to lean into the relationships, because I've got a degree in English from Austin B, my undergraduate degree, and every day it affects how I do my very administrative job in terms of how I communicate and write and analyze text and so on. But that's not what has set me up for my career. What set me up for my career are the soft skills that you learn along the way. Your ability to work with others, your ability to have conversations with people who think differently than you. And I think that's a special thing that a university like APSU has to offer, and that our humanities degrees have to offer. You're going to be put into situations with people who are fundamentally different. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. It's making the world a little bit more accessible. It's creating pathways for people to see different futures for themselves, and to interact with the people that are going to be along the way, even when they don't see the world the same way. And so those soft skills and those relationships are absolutely pivotal. And I would strongly encourage folks to lean into that.
Well, what I love about your story is again how that shows how education can transform a young person, and you've given us so many wonderful examples of how you've taken advantage of those opportunities to that were presented to you. So, thank you for sharing your story, Kyle. You're a good friend, and I certainly appreciate all that you do for Austin P.
Thank you, Buzz. It was a pleasure.
And thanks to all of our listeners and viewers out there for checking out the podcast. We hope that you will continue to join us as we profile some of the outstanding alumni we have here in the College of Arts and Letters at Austin P. So until next time, stay safe, take care, and God bless.